There. All right. The classic album of the week this week is 1977 album, Old Waylon. Waylon Jennings. This is a great album. You might have heard the song Luckenbach, Texas. You know, Waylon, Willie, and the Boys, right, talking about Willie Nelson. Anyway, another really good song on here, an expression that I use moderately often, is, anybody know what it's, if you see me getting smaller, you don't know what it is? If you see me getting smaller, I'm leaving, right? So, you know, when you're instead of saying goodbye, that's what you say. If you see me getting smaller, I'm leaving, right? And then they see you just getting smaller as you're walking away. So anyway, great song. If you see me getting smaller, I'm leaving. There's some other really good tunes on here. So anyway, Old Waylon, 1977. Willie Nelson, Hank, and so he sang together with Hank Williams Jr. and Willie Nelson. So anyway, take a listen to that. All right. I didn't get the exams graded completely, so but I'll turn those back in on Monday. So that's what we'll be doing. I said I always try and get them done in a week. I managed to get the 105 one done, but didn't quite get yours. So any questions on where we are so far in game theory? Good with that? Okay. So we were looking at sequential games, right? And the idea was that you're going to look forward and reason back. And we said that where you have a sequential game, you could, if there's a finite number of plays, you could theoretically go out and figure out all the different outcomes that could happen in your decision tree. And then you could find out, okay, that the last play, right, so it's a finite number, the last play, this person's going to do this, and then, okay, given they're going to do that, we know, and you could work your way back to the start. We noted that some simple games like tic-tac-toe, you can figure it out pretty easily, but chess turns out to be pretty hard. But by 1997, computers were strong enough to figure out lots of the different outcomes that could happen. And we also noted that in chess, champions, or maybe just people that are really good, can figure out, when there's 10 plays left, at that point they can figure out what the outcomes are going to be and work back and say, okay, I concede and that sort of thing. So now we're going to look at simultaneous games. And simultaneous games are games where either both parties go at the same time, or when you make your move, you don't know what the other person's doing, right? So you're either unaware of what the other person's move is, or you're doing it at the same time. So either, why it's called simultaneous, either both move at the same time, or you don't know the other's move. So it's as if you were playing at the same time. So instead of doing a decision tree, you have a payoff matrix. So basically all that is a chart that gives you what the payoff is to both players. Now, the simplest way to start this out is to start out with a zero-sum game. So let's start out that way, right? So what do we mean by a zero-sum game? Whatever the one person wins, the other person loses. Okay. Whatever one person wins, the other loses. So, poker game, right? We're playing blackjack, and if I win $100, you lose $100. Okay, it's a zero-sum game. Anytime that it's just there's no additional money coming in, there's no additional payoff, just one party wins, the other loses, then I only have to put in the payoff matrix just one number because the other person's getting the negative of that number. So let's just give you an example. Baseball season finishing up, right? Yankees lost, but the Dodgers won. I don't know if you're following baseball. Do we have spring? Or do we have baseball now too, or just baseball in the spring? Anybody? We just practice. You just practice now? Okay. All right, so let's take it. This is going to be the percentage of times that the hitter gets a hit. Okay? And we're going to have a hitter, and the pitcher is going to be able to throw, the pitcher can throw three different types of pitches. So let's do this where we're going to have the pitcher throws, and they can throw a fastball, they can throw a curve, or they can throw a cutter. And this is what the hitter anticipates. Right? So, if you ever played baseball, you're not supposed to signify what you're going to throw, okay? So the hitter doesn't know what you're going to throw, when you throw the ball. And the batter, they can anticipate whether you're going to, what they're looking for. They're looking for a fastball, whatever, but they don't know what it is. And so if we have, let's say the hitter anticipates a fastball, curve, and a cutter, and let's look at the payoff. Suppose it's a 40%. I can just leave the percentages out because we said it's the percentage. It's going to be the percentage of times that the hitter gets a hit. Let's make that 40, 30, 30, and then if it's a curve, it's 30, 40, and 30, and if it's a cutter, it's 10, 10, and 20. So how we're reading this is we're going to say, okay, if the hitter anticipates a fastball and the pitcher throws a fastball, 40% of the time, the hitter's going to hit it back. Okay? And anybody's played baseball, right? If you're a 400 hitter, it's a pretty good hitter, right? I don't even know what the record is. It's like probably in the 350s, or I don't know what the record is for, best hitting average or whatever. But so that'd be pretty good. But if the pitcher throws a fastball and the hitter's anticipating a curve, he's going to hit it back 30% of the time. And if the pitcher throws a fastball and the hitter's anticipating the cutter, going to hit it back 30% of the time. So the rule of this game then is rule number 2 is look for a dominant strategy. And what a dominant strategy is that it's the best strategy no matter what the other player does. So a dominant strategy is a strategy no matter what the other player does. That's your best strategy. So you're going to look for the first, when you look at to solve this game, you're going to look for, okay, is there a dominant strategy? Now, if we look at it, and if the hitter anticipates a fastball, right, the pitcher is looking for the smallest number, okay? So hitter anticipates a fastball. What's going to happen? They're going to pick the cutter. If the hitter anticipates the curve, then the best thing, the smallest number, the best thing for the pitcher is the cutter. And if the hitter anticipates the cutter, the best thing is the cutter. And so we have found a dominant strategy. Okay? So the dominant strategy then is we know that the pitcher is going to throw the cutter. But if the pitcher is going to throw the cutter, now what's the best thing for the hitter to do? The hitter, their largest number given that, and so they're looking for the big number, right? So that means that the hitter's going to anticipate the cutter, and we've got a solution to the game. Right? So if you're looking for a simultaneous game, what's the solution? Well, the one way to find the solution is let's look for dominant strategies. So there's some strategy that's the best thing no matter what the other does. Rivera, we were talking about, you know, the pitcher for the New York Yankees, always threw a cutter, okay? The payoff matrix for Manuel Rivera must have been looking like this. He had a dominant strategy no matter what the hitter anticipated. The best thing for him to do is throw a cutter. So given I found the dominant strategy for the one player, I can figure out what's the best strategy for the other. Now, nobody in here is an English major, are they? No. Okay. Well, let's do this. Let's look at a payoff matrix for girl and boy. And let's say we have the girl can love and the boy can love, or the girl can not love and the boy can not love. And let's say the payoff for if the boy loves and the girl loves him, this is going to be the boy's payoff. So if the girl loves and the boy loves, boy gets 100 utility units or whatever. Boy loves, girl doesn't love, he gets 40. If the girl loves and the boy doesn't, he gets 20. And if they both don't love, 30. Okay? Now, what are you going to do? Look for dominant strategy, right? If the girl loves, the best thing for the boy to do is love. And if the girl doesn't love, the best thing for the boy to do is love. So the boy has a dominant strategy of love. And the question is, who wrote about this? It was Alfred Lloyd Tennyson. And what did he say? You know, 'tis better to have loved and lost than never have loved at all. Yeah, right? You probably heard that. You've heard that little poem. 'Tis better to have loved and lost than never have loved at all. There's a game theory example for that. All right. Now, suppose that there is no dominant strategy. My wife always thinks that's a corny one, but I sort of like it. But all right, let's look at suppose there's no dominant strategy. So the next rule is rule number 3, and that says look for a dominated strategy. A dominated strategy. And what's a dominated strategy? A dominated strategy is a strategy where there's another strategy that beats it no matter what, right? So if there's some strategy that there's a second strategy that is better no matter what the other player does, then you're not going to use that one, right? So you throw it out. So let's just give you an example. Let's have for you, and let's have your opponent. And let's put up, you have 4 things that you can do. You could do A, and your opponent could do A, B, C, and D, and we'll let your opponent be A, B, C, and D. So both of you have four strategies that you could do. So let's put the payoff as 10, 12, 8, and 6, and then 6, 2, 12, and 3, then 7, 8, 8, and 7, and then 9, 9, 14, and 8. Okay? And so it's a zero-sum game, so you're looking for the big number, and your opponent's looking for the small number. So looking for a dominated strategy, you're going to say, okay, is there any strategy that is always less than another strategy? So if you look at this, B and C are both, for you, are both less than D. So if the opponent plays A, B and C are always less than D. If your opponent plays B, B and C are less than D. If your opponent plays C, B and C are less than D. And if your opponent plays D, B and C are less than D. Okay? So we're going to say that B and C are dominated by D. Because again, it's a zero-sum game. You're looking for the largest payoff. Your opponent's looking for the smallest payoff. So I'm going to go, okay, I'm not going to do B, and I'm not going to do C. So what does that mean? It means that now I've got a payoff matrix that looks smaller. Okay? My payoff matrix is now, I'm going to take these out of here. Right? So that becomes the payoff matrix. So now if we're looking at the payoff matrix, this is another payoff matrix. So what do? You go back to rule 1. Look and see if anybody's got a dominant strategy. Well, given that the payoff matrix now looks like this, if you do A, your opponent's going to pick D, right? If you do D, which is the only other strategy now, your opponent's going to pick D. So now what happens is D is a dominant strategy for your opponent. Okay? They're going to pick D. So we were able to solve the game. Okay? What's going to happen is your opponent's going to play D, and what are you going to do? You're going to play D because you're looking for the biggest one. Okay? So if I'm looking at a simultaneous game, I'm looking at a payoff matrix, and when I look at that payoff matrix, I'm going to first of all look, is there some strategy that's the best for me no matter what the other person does, or what's best for the other player no matter what I do? If that's going to happen, you know what one of the players is going to play. Given that you know what that player is going to play, you know what the other player is going to play. If there's no dominant, notice there was no dominant strategy when we started, okay? But the payoff matrix is bigger than it needs to be, okay? Because you aren't going to play. We can look through and say, well, you're never going to play B and C. There's always a D is going to be better. Now notice that you don't have a dominant strategy here, right? Because if the opponent plays A, you're going to pick this one. You're going to pick A. But if your opponent plays C, you're going to pick D. So you don't have a dominant strategy, even though we've wiped those out. Yeah.
Are these numbers representative of the payout to us explicitly and not to either player?
This is the payoff to you, okay? And right, because it's a zero, because like I said, it's a zero-sum game. If it wasn't a zero-sum game, and we'll talk about that when we do Prisoner's Dilemma, where let's say you win 10 and I win 5, okay, then it's not a zero-sum game. In a zero-sum game, if you win 10, your opponent gets minus 10, okay? So I only got to put the one number up there. The opponent is looking for the smallest number, and you're looking for the biggest number. Yeah?
So these strategies would still work in a non-zero-sum game. You just have to look at the payout.
That's correct. The strategy is going to work no matter what, whether it's a zero-sum game, it's just a matter of I only got to put one number in when I'm doing a zero-sum game. I know that you're looking for the, if you're looking for the biggest number, your opponent looking for the smallest number, okay? So it just makes it easier to go through the analysis with a zero-sum game to start with. But it's true of any game. If it's a non-zero-sum game, and again, when we do prisoner's dilemma, we're going to come back. When we do prisoner's dilemma, what we're going to find out is that both of us have a dominant strategy, and it's worse for us than if we don't play our dominant strategy, okay? In fact, that's what I was, when I was, well, in the 105 class, I talk about the tobacco companies and how they got the law passed to make it so you can't advertise on television. But so we'll come back to that in a little bit, but that's a good question. Okay, now there might not be a solution to the game, right? It might be that we don't have, if for example I'd have made this, where this was, let's say if they picked D, that's best for them, but then if we'd have switched this and made this 8 and 14, okay, then I don't have a solution, right? Because it depends on what you don't have a dominant strategy, I don't have and your opponent doesn't have a dominant strategy, then there might not be a solution to the game. And this is what's called a pure strategy. In a bit, we'll talk about what could happen if you have a mixed strategy where you could do this 30% of the time you're going to, 30% of the time you could, your strategy would be 30% of the time you play throw the cutter, and 70% of the time you throw the fastball, okay? So that would be a mixed strategy. But we're talking about pure strategies. You're doing this or you're doing that, okay? So again, there might not be a solution to the game. Now, if there's no solution to the game, one way to look at it is to look at what's called a Nash equilibrium. And what we're looking for is an equilibrium strategy. Is there some equilibrium where both parties, right, both parties are doing what is best for them given what the other party's doing? Okay? Both parties are doing what's best for them given what the other party's doing. So let's take a look at the last presidential election between Trump and Biden. And let's say we're just looking at how much Trump should spend given what Biden is spending. And we're going to look at how much Biden should spend given what Trump is spending. And if you're running a presidential campaign, that's something you got to think about, right? How much do I want to spend in advertising? Well, I don't need to spend as much on advertising if Trump isn't spending anything, right? I don't have to spend nearly as much. But if Trump's spending a whole boatload of money, I probably got to spend a lot more, okay? That was in the, that was something that they were looking at in the recall election in California, right? How much money do we have to raise in order to, given how much the other parties are raising? How much are the Republicans raising? How much are they going to spend on this thing? If they're not going to spend anything on the recall, then, I'm Newsom, I don't have to spend a lot. But if you're the Republicans and Newsom's spending a whole boatload of money, he's raised all this money from George Soros and he's, spending millions, okay? Then if we're going to win, then we're going to have to spend millions. So let's go back to Rod Stewart. Every picture tells a story. So let's draw a picture of that story that we just told. Suppose that I'm going to we're going to have, here's how much Trump is spending. And here's how much Biden is spending. And let's say if Biden isn't spending anything, the best thing for Trump to do is to spend that much. Okay? And then as Biden is spending more, Trump's got to spend more. Okay? So we're going to put this as Trump spending. Given what Biden is spending. So this diagram here says if Biden is spending this much, then Trump should spend that much. If Biden is spending more, Trump should spend more. And then we can do the same thing for Biden. We'll do this. Okay, so this is Biden given Trump. Okay. So, and of course that happens in elections, right? Somebody's out there making the decision about how much they're going to, Trump was going to spend. There was somebody working in the Trump campaign that was making that decision. And somebody in the Biden campaign was making the decision how much we're going to spend, how much you're going to spend in California, how much you're going to spend in Texas, whatever. Okay? And so let's say that we start out with that Trump, let's do it this. Suppose that Trump is at A, right? Suppose Trump is spending here. Okay? But if Trump is at A, we're going to start out Trump is spending A. So Trump is spending A. Then that's not the right spot for Biden, right? If Trump is at A, given Trump's at A, Biden ought to be spending over here at B, right? So if Trump is spending at A, then Biden should be at B. Okay? But if Biden's at B, on this line, if Biden is spending that much, what ought to happen? Trump ought to be at C, right? So if Biden's at B, Trump should be at C. Well, you can see what's going to happen, right? If Trump is spending C, Biden should be there, right? And if Biden's there, Trump ought to be there. And what's going to happen? It's not an equilibrium until you get where they both cross, right? Anything where if they're not crossing, it's not an equilibrium. I'm doing the wrong amount given what the other player's doing, or Biden's spending the wrong amount given what Trump's doing. So there's not an equilibrium until at E. At E, that's why it's called a Nash equilibrium, right? Nash was very much involved in game theory, okay? And not Graham Nash, but okay. But Nash was very much involved in game theory, and why is it called a Nash equilibrium? It's called a Nash equilibrium because given that Biden is at B, right? Excuse me. What, given that Biden's at E, then Trump is at E, and given Trump is at E, then Biden should be at E. If that's where they are, where those two things intersect, it's an equilibrium. I'm doing I'm looking at, I'm Trump's campaign manager, and I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, here's how much Biden's spending, here's how much we should be spending. And Biden's folks are looking over here and saying, oh, Trump's spending this amount, here's that we should be spending, and it's the right amount for both of us. There's no incentive to change. That's what an equilibrium is. Okay? So, rule number 4, right? Is going to be the obvious here, right? Look for a Nash equilibrium. This is a solution to the game, right? If they're both doing what's best, if they're both doing what's best for them, given what the other person's doing, then that's it, right? There's no incentive for either party to change. If you did something that, notice if you did something that altered, let's say Facebook gets invented, okay? And, the amount that you spend is now different than before there was Facebook, right? It might move these curves around and you'd get a different equilibrium. So things that would alter the optimal strategy given what the other player does is going to move where that equilibrium is. And like I said, if this were, when was Facebook started? 2005, I think Facebook started. So, you couldn't advertise on Facebook in 2005, right? So that diagram might look different today, given than it did in 2005. So, somehow, again, as in most of the things we talk about, you may not know the exact answer, right? We don't know what the exact marginal external cost is to do a Pigouvian tax, okay? But it gives you an idea, okay, if there's something that, we should expect that if you hired somebody that knows what the heck they're doing to run your campaign, then we should expect that they're probably going to get to something like this. There's going to be some form of equilibrium. Now, you might not have a Nash equilibrium, okay? Just like there might not be a, right? There might not be a Nash equilibrium. Just as there might not be a solution where you found the dominant strategy or you found the dominated strategies, you threw them out, then you found the dominant strategy. There might not be a solution to this. So we said, okay, let's look for Nash equilibrium where there's not a dominant strategy. It's always the best, a dominant strategy is always the best thing for me to do no matter what Biden's doing. Well, that's clearly not the case, right? That we drew this showing that the amount that Trump is going to spend depends on what Biden's going to spend, right? So there's not a dominant or dominated strategy here, but we are looking for is there some sort of equilibrium. But there might not be, right? If what I did was let me just, again, if we have Trump and we have Biden, if we drew a picture that went like this, right? This is going to be how much Trump should spend, given what Biden's going to spend. And if Biden's looked like this, they don't intersect, right? So there's not an equilibrium. On your own, you can just draw pictures where they cross more than once, right? You could have multiple, right? You might not have any, but you could have multiple ones. So you can just I could have multiple Nash equilibria. That is, again, if you just, all you needed to do, if you draw these things so that they go like this, and the other one goes like that, they might intersect at more than one spot, right? So let's sort of, we can think about that for a moment. I was just walking down the stairs this morning from my office, okay? Somebody's walking up the stairs, okay? Should I be on the right side or should I be on the left side? Okay? If they're coming up the stairs on the right side, I should be going down the stairs on the right side, and then we don't crash into each other. But if they're going to be on the left side, then I should be on the left side, right? So what happens? We got multiple equilibria here. Everybody walking on the right-hand side as you're going down the stairs, okay, that works if everybody coming up the stairs is going to be on the right-hand side. How many people, when they're going up the stairs and there's somebody coming down, will stay on the left-hand side? You don't, right? You move to the right-hand side, okay? Why? Just because that's the way we do it, right? Just think about this. Similar idea is you could drive on the right-hand side of the road, or you can drive on the left-hand side of the road. Those are both equilibria, right? If you've ever seen, how many have ever seen this show called Ted Lasso? Really? You should watch Ted Lasso, right? I think it's on Apple TV. Anyway, it won a bunch of Academy Awards, and it's about a college soccer coach that gets hired to coach this England professional soccer league team. And but when you see him getting into the car, okay, or somebody drives up to pick him up, what's going on? At first you're going, oh, they're getting in the wrong side of the car, right? Because it looks like he's getting in the passenger side or the driver's side when he's really getting the passenger side. Why is that? Because in England, what happens? You drive on the left-hand side, right? In the US, you drive on the right-hand side. Those are both Nash equilibria. Given that everybody else is driving on the right-hand side, I should drive on the right-hand side. But if everybody else is driving on the left-hand side, then I should drive on the left-hand side. So we got Nash equilibria, and they both work, and it sort of just depends on how you guys decided on it. Somebody must have decided we're going to all drive on the right-hand side. I have absolutely no idea why it is in the United States that you drive on the right-hand side of the road. Why is it that you don't drive on the left-hand side of the road in Texas and you drive on the right-hand side of the road in California? I don't know why that is. But we evidently have chosen that Nash equilibrium in the United States, and it's a different Nash equilibrium than you're in England. Now, I spent a few weeks in Ireland with my family a number of years ago and rented a car. Okay? Well, what's the deal, right? It's very different, right? You're on the right-hand side of the drivers. So, and they have all sorts of roundabouts. So you got to know, okay, which direction do I go on the roundabout? So I had to have my wife keep me focused. Okay, you're going to the left now, okay? Because you're going to want to go to the right, but you're going to go to the left. I don't know if you ever have, how many of you have ever rented a car where it's on the right-hand side instead of the left-hand side? You haven't done it? Well, when you do, it's more difficult if you, one of the hardest things I found was shifting. So, I got, in those days, I mean, nowadays almost every car's got an automatic transmission, but in those days, it was cheaper if you got a car that had a manual, so you had to shift, right? Well, I'm used to shifting this way, but you don't, because you're sitting on the other side, so you got to shift this way, which means that instead of going from, if you're going from, you go first, second, third, when you're coming down, you go third, second, you do it the opposite way over here, right? Because it goes first, second, third, right? You got to go back that way. So it took a while to figure that out. But the bottom line is that there may be a reason that a particular Nash equilibrium is picked. If you're walking down the street, okay, you're walking on, let's say you're walking on the sidewalk, okay? And it's, a sidewalk, is this wide or whatever, and you're walking down the sidewalk, and there's someone else coming towards you. Where you obviously don't just want to bash into them, right? So you can either go to the right, and if they go to the right, it works out, or you can go to the left, and if they go to the left, it works out. How many would move to the right if you were walking towards somebody like on the sidewalk? Right? Yeah. We'd all go to the right, okay? Why is that? Because we drive on the right-hand side of the road, probably, right? So whatever the Nash equilibria is, in one instance, may turn out to be a Nash equilibrium on the other. There's clearly no statute that says when walking towards someone, you should always move to the right, okay? But we all do it that way. And we do it that way probably because that's what we're used to doing when we have a similar situation. Also, what happens if there's multiple Nash equilibria? There might be another way to pick it. If there's multiple Nash equilibria, you might pick the obvious one. Or pick the most likely. You're trying to reach, let's say that you told somebody you were going to meet them at the college, on the college campus, Hillsdale College campus at 2 o'clock. Okay? So we're going to meet college campus at 2 o'clock. But you forgot to say where. Well, nowadays, what would you do? You'd text them, right? Okay? But pretend that pretend we're back in the days when you didn't have cell phones, okay? So you told somebody, oh, I'll meet you on the college campus at 2, but you forgot to tell them where. Notice what you have is you have multiple equilibria. If you're at Lane, they should be at Lane, right? You at Lane Hall, they should be at Lane Hall. Given that you're at Lane Hall, what's the best thing for them to do? Be at Lane Hall. Given that they're going to be at Lane Hall, what's the best thing for you to do? Be at Lane Hall. Okay? So both of us are doing what's the best thing given what the other party's doing. But suppose that they're at Moss Hall, right? Given that you're at Moss Hall, they should be at Moss Hall. Given they're at Moss Hall, then you should be at Moss Hall. To think of all the multiple equilibria there could be. Probably, in fact, this happened to me the other day because I didn't have the person's cell phone. Okay, I had told them I'd meet them at the campus at 1 o'clock. Okay, but we hadn't decided where we were going to meet. So where did I go? I went to the front of the Civil War statue. right? So I went to the Civil War statue. I could, be noticeable. I could see them if they were coming from somewhere else, and they are. And you can also see Central Hall, right? So either the Civil War statue or Central Hall are probably where you ought to be, okay? And the other party's sort of knowing that. So if there's some sort of more obvious place to be, that's where you ought to pick. If there's multiple Nash equilibria, then what you ought to do is look to see if there's an obvious place what's the obvious one to choose. If you're in the United States and you're going up and down the stairs, okay, and everybody drives on the right-hand side of the road, and everybody's walking, on the right-hand side of the sidewalk when they come in against you, probably the obvious thing to do is pick going on the right-hand side as you're going up and down the stairs, even though no one's ever told you. I'm going to guess no one's ever told you, right? Your mom and dad didn't say, oh, by the way, you always should go up and down the stairs on the right-hand side, right? Nobody told you that, but that's what you do. Last point to make is notice that in a competitive market, what happens? It's a Nash equilibria. We'll call it Nash equilibrium, because what are you doing? Prices are given, and you're doing the best thing that you can do, right? You're maximizing your utility, or you are minimizing your cost, or you're maximizing your profit. And what happens? You have your cost function, and everybody else has got their cost function, and what are they all doing? They're all trying to maximize utility, and you guys all acting, what do? You end up setting the price, okay? So what happens in a competitive, when you learn Econ 202, when you're in a competitive market, what's going on? Everybody's a price taker, right? Which means that how's that price getting set? Everybody is maximizing their utility. And you're maximizing your utility given that everybody else is maximizing their utility. And so the demand and supply curves are coming together, and there's some equilibrium price. So basically a competitive market is, in a sense, a Nash equilibrium. Everybody's doing the best thing for them, given what everybody else is doing is what? It's determining what the prices are. And you're so small that you can't change what the prices are. So you've got a Nash equilibrium. A competitive equilibrium is a Nash equilibrium. All right. I'll have the exams back on Monday. I've graded some of them already. People seem to be doing okay, and I'll turn those back on Monday, and then we'll start the prisoner's dilemma in chapter 4. And so, again, just look through, over the weekend, why don't you go ahead and just read chapter 4 and 7. Those are the two chapters that are left to do in the Thinking Strategically.